Hey guys, how you doing today? Just getting off work. Just had myself a nice burrito from the burrito place downtown. They got it. Of all the places I've been, their gluten-free options, they're the best ones. Fat bastard burrito. It's unfortunate that they've got that name. I can't say it inside the toy store I work, so it's perpetually the burrito place down the way. And then people say to me, "You mean fat?" And they look around like, "Fat little kids running around." I mean, come on, for God's sakes, it's the same old story here. Doug Ford puts on a big show about how they're going to do something. They announce absolutely nothing. We're up at 1,500 cases a day now, and it's only going to get worse, right? We're going to get to 2, we're going to get to 3,000 cases. It's going to happen. Because the reality is that Doug Ford has no incentive whatsoever to give a shit about anybody but himself, right? He doesn't care if he loses the next election. He doesn't care at all if he loses the next election, right? He's secured his loyalty amongst the billionaire class. That was what this was always about for Doug Ford. It was about securing his own personal position and showing his loyalty to the billionaire class so that when he is voted out of office, he will be well taken care of by the billionaires. He'll have a big house, he'll have the big nice truck. They'll make sure he has a nice cushy job and he doesn't actually have to work a day in his life. Not that he's ever worked a day in his life in the first place. And that'll be the story of Doug Ford, right? Plenty of people will die. We're going to end up with huge numbers, probably the largest numbers in Canada. And then Canada itself is going to end up with just enormous numbers. But the thing is that all of this is going to be dwarfed by the numbers that are coming out of the United States, right? People aren't going to pay any attention to Doug Ford on the world stage. They're not going to care at all. He's not going to make national headlines. He's not going to make national news. Everybody's just reeling about the Americans. And once again, the worthless Canadian political class hides behind the failures of America. It's like how the liberals hide behind America's wars, right? Hide their arms dealers, right? They can sell as many weapons as they want to Saudi Arabia and Turkey, right? And nobody says boo about it because the Americans are the one launching the war, right? We're just the arms dealers. So, if you pay attention to Canadian politics, you find out pretty quickly that these politicians are worthless and completely complicit in all of this evil activity. So it's like barely even worth talking about anymore, right? They're obviously going to act like the sociopaths and complicit cowards that they are. And it's 100% because this is what capitalism generates. It's becoming so obvious now. Anytime I encounter anybody who's actually pro-capitalism, I'm like, Jesus, you've got to be completely delusional at this point. And what you end up realizing is that you're talking to either a person who went through like the 60s and 70s when capitalism was structured in such a way so that, yeah, you could make the claim that it's actually legitimate. You could actually make the claim that, hard work gets you somewhere. But after like the 80s and the 90s, like there's just no, and of course now we're in this like late stage. It's not even capitalism anymore, right? It stopped being capitalism once the governments started bailing out large institutions, right? Like that's socialism for the rich. Well, otherwise known as, oh, dare I say it, fascism, which is exactly what it is. Any inkling that this is a capitalist society, like it's sort of a joke that people call this a capitalist society, because capitalism has failed. Capitalism has collapsed, and it has fallen back into a type of neo-feudalism, right? Feudalism was confronted by the merchants and the poor, the serfs living in a serf society, who transferred over to capitalist society, which of course was born of violence and genocide and slavery, which is what capitalism requires to perpetuate itself. And for a moment, it allowed people social mobility. Of course, this collapses constantly in capitalism. When you look at the Great Depression, throughout my lifetime, there's been 3 major economic collapses in capitalism, and we're going to have further ones that are just going to continuously collapse this system. And what I'm seeing, right, in the job I work and the job that everybody works, we are serfs, right? We are serfs, and the only difference that we have is that we have been given permission to voluntarily leave the service of our Lord. That really is it. That if you are in a certain economic class, you are a lord or a prince or a king, right? It makes sense. Like if you have $1 billion, and here in Canada it's as obvious as it gets, right? David Thompson is literally a monarch, right? He's literally a baron, right? I'm not bestowing him with that. He was born with $1 billion in his bank account and with the title of the 3rd Baron of Fleet. Like, he's a monarch. And now that capitalism has collapsed, I'm no longer happy to say that it is collapsing. Like, it has collapsed. It is a system that no longer exists, except in propaganda. We are living in a new neo-feudal society, right? You can't actually find mobility outside of the system you were born into, except through incredible fortune and incredible luck. And but the chances are extremely good if you're born into poverty today, you die in poverty and your family remains in poverty, and that's how it works. And it's structured that way, right? It's structured that way. So the capitalist system, insofar as it existed in the first place, the only reason it was actually allowing for any kind of social mobility or allowing people to gain any kind of wealth is because of the hard labor and dedication of communists and socialists, right? The only reason you're permitted in the first place to have a piece of property, start a business, actually make anything for yourself that you get to keep and like grow anything through your hard work and effort is through major government handouts and major government support systems. It's always been that way. It's always been that way, right? Like, you're not, I'm going to just move over here so you can see my face, even though most of you have ducked out by now. Like, if you're in America, post-World War II, chances are really good that you took advantage of the GI Bill, right? GI Bill being one of the largest government handouts in the nation's history. If you were a colonizer, right, coming from England or Britain, the islands or France or Spain, chances are good you took advantage of the Homestead Act, which gave people free land, right? Like, these are enormous government bailouts and enormous government handouts to working people. And we've entered this, like, delusional place where we pretend that didn't happen. And we pretend like the only thing that got us anywhere was rugged capitalist individualism, when the exact opposite is completely true. Like, capitalism has achieved nothing. All it's achieved is dividing the country and dividing the society. One of the things I've been thinking about recently, people have been saying, our country's never been more divided. It's like, yeah, of course, because the lines are between reality and not reality, right? Of course the country is divided. You have a group of people who deny the existence of reality, and another group of people who are saying, man, reality is a thing. We need to deal with it and try and fix the problems that reality is putting in front of us. So yeah, of course the country is divided. One country is looking at a beaver and saying, that is a beaver. And the other group of people are saying there's no animal there. Like, they're not even acknowledging that reality is in front of them. And the propaganda has gotten them so thickly in the head that, like, what are we supposed to do about this? What are we supposed to do about this except organize? Like, we can't convince them. You can't convince somebody that an apple is not, I don't know, an apple is not a hat, you know? Like, this is the level of delusion that we're talking here. And what it's going to take, and what I fear it's going to take here in Canada, is it will take the people of Canada just living under a conservative government and seeing what that means, right? It is going to take them. They're so gullible and so deluded and so just full of the nonsense, believing like Aaron O'Toole is a good man when he is obviously not. Obviously not. Like, the guy wants to privatize the healthcare system. He said as much. And people will simply have to live under the Conservatives to realize how stupid they are in supporting Conservatives. Like, it's what's going to happen. I used to think, like, maybe we could convince them. I don't think so. I think it's going to take, like, there are people in the society who just will not acknowledge that climate change is a problem until the food shortages start. Once the food shortages begin, that's when some of those guys will start to wake up. But even then, a lot of these guys will just blame immigrants because it's all they can do, right? They can't confront reality. You know, they live in this sort of false space where they are not capable of doing any wrong because they see themselves as gods, right? They can't even contemplate their own deaths, let alone the idea that they could possibly be wrong about their political alignment. And the more the more they dive into fantasy, the more hysterical the nonsense needs to become, right? Like, it's like all this anti-China rhetoric that comes out of the right. It's such hysterical nonsense. Like, their own society is in free fall collapse. Their children are literally, like, living in poverty, can't find homes, can't make enough money to actually find a place to live, so they have to move back home. The whole thing is unraveling and collapsing. And meanwhile, China is standing there being like, well, what are you talking about? Our economic growth is great. Our economic growth is great. We're doing very well. It's just like, it's just this hysterical arrogance. And all we can do is keep talking about it and keep being honest about it and keep communicating to each other about how ridiculous everything is. Like, we've got this do-nothing prime minister who's actually worse than Stephen Harper. Like, this current Liberal administration is worse than the Harper Conservatives, for sure. The Harper Conservatives at least did things like passed a childcare benefit, right? The Trudeau Liberals have done, like, zero. They've done, like, literally nothing. So I don't know why we consider them worth anything. So we'll see how it all shakes out. I think that's the end of me, guys. I hope you're all doing well out there. Find love, find a cigar, find a cigarette, find a joint, find a bottle of Jack, find whatever you need. Whatever you need. I don't think there's any limits anymore. We are the abandoned. Good luck.